Thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate that. The sixth step and the sixth tradition. Thanks for showing up. When people hear the tradition,
That's right.
You don't see this many people, so I give you a lot of credit. Man, I got to say this. I think I've been in abandoned buildings at the moment. Like, better lighting, too. With candlelight.
You know, that's right.
Tell I'm cold.
Yeah.
I'm at that age
That's right.
and stage in my life where I didn't dress as warm as I should have.
Mm-hmm.
So grateful to get an opportunity to share. Thank you very much. I appreciate it hearing you share. I'm a member of Narcotics Anonymous, and I'm an informed and active member of Narcotics Anonymous. I'm proud to say that. You know, I went to the opening meeting last night. It was very awesome. I made a piece of the car report this morning because I want to be informed. And then I went to hear a friend share. I forgot I was sharing. And then another friend speaking next door, I go, scream loud enough and I'll be able to hear you share. I'm sorry I can't stay. I got to go do this. And yeah, I found out too, I was going to share on. And if you saw the sign out there, it says, how not to lend or leading or NA message, or, they misspelled lending. But we're not perfect and we're addicts. We're here because of the 12 traditions of Narcotics Anonymous. We have a program that saved our life because of the traditions of Narcotics Anonymous. I love sharing on the traditions of Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm sitting here looking out with the eyes of someone who's been here a while. I got clean September 18th, 1986, and never took no breaks, kept coming back, hung on, no matter what. And I learned from some people who really, really believed in this program. And the predecessors just hit me right. I feel connected. I never felt, not just in this moment, in my life, at the stage of my recovery and the stage of my life, the phase, I never felt more connected spiritually, ever. And it's because of this program and I guess long-term recovery and being clean and in recovery, and because of the spiritual awakening as a result of the steps and a relationship with a power greater than myself, surviving life on life's terms, right? And I never thought I would be the guy doing something like this. I'm very attracted to service and history, Narcotics Anonymous history. I never planned how I would be that guy. I'm often asked to speak on the traditions. I'm proud to do that because I know people struggle with that. And I love telling newcomers, don't be afraid of the traditions. They are here to help us, not hurt us. A lot of people feel they don't have the experience or they can articulate or explain or describe or share. You do. I'm telling you, you do. When we walk into a meeting and that meeting is set up and there's literature on the table, and there's coffee coffee made and maybe some cook. That's unity. Some people got there from that home group and together they put that together. That's the first tradition. The fact that we're all here, there's no requirement for membership. There's no levels of membership. There's no dues or fees. We're here because we're addicts and we want help. And if you say you're an addict, you're a member of Narcotics Anonymous. And that second tradition invites a loving God to direct us in our decision making, just like the second step in the steps, right? The steps are for personal recovery and the traditions are there to guide the groups. But we wouldn't be here without the traditions. And I love sharing this story because it's part of our history. Everyone should know, and most NA members know, Narcotics Anonymous was founded in July 1953 in California. And in the Miracles Happen book, put out by Narcotics Anonymous World Services, that goes into the historical, in pictures and photos and documents, and they have a lot of pictures and archives in there. There's a story in there. In 1959, there was one NA meeting. And there was a guy that controlled that meeting. And the guy happened to be an actor. That group The last meeting of Narcotics Anonymous in '59, because Narcotics Anonymous at the start, people would relapse. There wasn't enough people. They didn't believe. They went back to where they came from. They struggled in the early years. So '59, I read 2 reports. I read that meeting almost folded. I also read in the history of Narcotics Anonymous in the Florida history book put out by the Florida NA region, that meeting actually closed, that NA died for 2 or 3 months. So I don't know which version is more accurate. But the Jimmy K, who we know started Narcotics Anonymous with some other folks, stopped going to that meeting because they didn't follow traditions. They had speakers that were not NA members. They collected money, accepted money from outside NA members. They weren't self-supporting. People said, screw this isn't, they went somewhere else. And that guy got a big acting gig, and he called up Jimmy K. And he said, would you come to the meeting this week? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm leaving town. I'm going to give you the key. And Jimmy showed up with 2 women, and I like to share this I don't share it from rehearsed or out of the book. This is what I remember from the story. He showed up with 2 women. One was named Penny, and God, why did I forget the other name right now? She shows up with 2 women. And he gives them the keys. And the 2 women are crying. And they say, Jimmy, what are we going to do? He goes, the first thing we're going to do is sit down and have a cup of coffee. Because the second thing we're going to do is we're going to put this together right, and we're going to follow the 12 traditions. And NA restarted. And that is why we're here today. 73 years later it will be. So I love telling that story. It's Penny, and why do I forget the woman? Her name started with an S. They were kind of the real early members. Imagine if they just said, fuck it too, and didn't show up for a commitment. Imagine if they said, why keep trying if no one's coming?
That's right.
I don't know how many of you started a group and no one came, and you'd be the only one there maybe, or 1 or 2 people, but you kept, and then one person would show up and it made it all worth it. But anyway, I'll try to talk about the 6th tradition and how not to lend our NA name, and I'm going to try to piece it together in 2 parts. So the 6th tradition is an NA group will never endorse, finance, or lend the NA name to any outside facility to any facility or outside enterprise, less problems of money, property, or prestige. Right? This makes us us. And one of the spiritual principles of the 6th tradition is integrity. And I love talking about that because we often hear about the atmosphere in our meetings, the atmosphere of recovery. That we listen to each other, there's no crosstalk, that a meeting is structured and disciplined. And it is that way because when NA started, we were notoriously known to not be, to be rowdy. We weren't accepted in places. It was hard to get meetings started. And in my time, when I got here, I got clean in New York in '86. Narcotics Anonymous was 5 years old. They were already put together. They had area, they had region, they had meetings. They had one convention, a regional convention. They had HNIPI and all that. We were structured, but we were still growing. We were growing at a peak. And the real piece of that is because of the basic text that came out in 1983. I don't know how many of you know, before the basic text came out, there was some 3,000 meetings in the world in 1983. I heard 2,700, I heard 3,000, I heard 2,400. Within 2 years after the basic text came out, there was almost 10,000 meetings. And today we have 77,000 or 80,000. That basic text trajected us and brought this message out to so many people because it brought in a lot of funds to the World Services that was able to publish more literature, translate literature in other languages. And this is because we were following our traditions. The other thing you see in meetings when you come is that primary purpose, that atmosphere I was just talking about. You come into a meeting and people talk and listen, you hear them share, you identify, you relate, you connect. And, you probably, we're scared, but we keep coming back and we find a home, we know we belong here. That primary purpose, each group has one primary purpose, carry the message for the addict who suffers. And what's our message? The message is hope and the promise is freedom. Where do we get all this from? It is not words in a book. It's not on that reading. It's not a punchline. It's living proof every time we go to a meeting and people show up to hear about the traditions. And some of us learn and pass on to you about the traditions. And the seventh tradition, you pass it back. You see all of this going on in the meeting. That's the traditions coming to life. And we're not related to the church or community center or whatever building you're in, wherever your home group is. We're not related. We make that clear, you know. We don't endorse outside enterprise. We don't get tangled up with other fellowships. We don't lend our name. And I'll try to get to some examples of this in my experience, especially with H&I. You know, we practice anonymity. I love my anonymity and privacy in Narcotics Anonymous. I love the confidentiality that I feel I can trust most of the time in most of the means that I share it, you know. But sponsorship backs that up if there's something I don't want to put out in the meeting. And we're a program of attraction. So we see the traditions living proof every time we go to it, even in the convention. What's the convention? We create service boards and committees responsible to us, the groups, right? You got H&I, PI, events and activities. You got convention committees, fundraising, area, region. I do an H&I commitment, and we have a very structured format. It happens to be a correctional facility. Our format is so thorough. It tells you what Narcotics Anonymous is and what Narcotics Anonymous is not. And embedded in our format, that most, I'm sure, all of our commitments are sticking to the script pretty much. And I stick to the script as, I'm not going to say 100%, but we try to stick to the script. Why? That's the conscience of the H&I committee, that this is what we read at our H&I panels and presentations. And it says in there, our purpose here today is to carry the message of Narcotics Anonymous, that any addict can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. We tell them specifically, we are not doctors, therapists, or counselors. We are addicts who volunteer and come here to share our message of hope to you and recovery. Right? We lay it out. That's the traditions being laid out, explained, and delivered. And then we tell them, we are not related to this facility in any way. They just allow us to come in here to carry our message. So, you know, I learned this in my very first business meeting. When I got clean, I remember staying at this meeting on a Friday night, and they said they were going to have a business meeting. I was somewhere in my first couple weeks clean, and someone said, "You're going to stick around?" I said, "Yeah, I guess." And all these people who were serene and calm in the meeting were screaming, yelling, cursing. This guy AX that sponsored me was like the worst one. And I'm saying, "Holy God, I thought there was going to be a fight." You know, I'm getting like, you know, looking for something to grab. And this dude came up to me, old-time dope fiend from the 50s. He goes, "You want to be a member of this group?" I was like, I go, "What?" I go, "I don't know." "Yeah, maybe." He goes, I go, "What do I got to do?" "Here, clean a coffee pot."
That's right.
And I'm cleaning a coffee pot while these people are arguing. But they calmed down. And they made decisions for the group. What they were going to do with the money. How they were going to send it to area. Who was going to chair and be the secretary. They sat down there in unity. They had a business meeting. And I saw Narcotics Anonymous work. Why? Because they were following traditions and not our own attitudes and, you know, behaviors. We keep each other in check. And so our name, you know, I've seen over the years where, you know, certain treatment centers would maybe promote on their literature and marketing that they have not only 12-step meetings, they would put our name on there, you know, and that's an endorsement. And we don't allow that, we tell them. I remember going to do a PI presentation once, and we just did a good presentation. Someone came up and said, "You guys, we want to pay you for this." Well, we have a 7th tradition. We're fully, so we don't accept, hey, we do this from the heart.
That's right.
Right? That's because we got traditions to guide us. And think about this for a minute. I like to say it this way. The primary purpose certainly is the primary purpose. But the first 4 traditions are like the layers to protect that. You got to have unity first tradition, because we got to work together to make this work and make this happen. The second tradition invites a loving God into our decision making, right? Leaders are but trusted servants. They don't govern that way. We don't get out of hand like that one group that almost died and then they died with it. And so we have unity, and then we're followed by a loving higher power guiding us. Spiritual direction, spiritual principles. The third tradition opens up that independence and freedom to be a member. Mm-hmm. We don't have levels or differences. I'll never forget, just recently, I was at an anniversary. This guy celebrated 44 years clean. And he was celebrating with someone 5 years clean. And when it was his turn to speak, you know what he said? He said to the guy with 5 years clean, "Me and you are the same."
That's right.
Not clean time. We're members. Some of us got here before you. Your time is now. If you're coming in now, our time is... I guess my time is now too, so in a way, I hope. We're equals. And that's what anonymity also brings us. But that so that fourth tradition, autonomy, gives us the independence for groups to set their own format, that's why we have a variety of meetings with different topics. We have so much literature today. You could go to a meeting to your liking, and if you don't like that meeting, go to another one. Mm-hmm. I kind of prefer to go to a lot of step meetings over a lot of other meetings. And, tradition meetings today are far and few between. Mm-hmm. When I got clean, and like I said, the basic text was 3 years old, they were starting to have meetings, step and tradition, in our language and our literature written by addicts. Mm-hmm. So there was more step and tradition meetings when I got clean, speaker meetings and IP meetings. We didn't have it just for today. We didn't have it work sound like. So, now today, man, we got such a variety of topics. So these tradition meetings are not so frequent as they used to be. And I think that created a gap for us. We're not teaching newcomers, I think, the way and service. Like a lot of times, and this is not to take anything away from today's NA. Mm-hmm. Your time is your time. NA is right now. We're making NA history. You're living your life and recovering. It's the same for you as it was for me when I got here. I'm just happen to be a little older and down the road maybe than some. And I love meeting other people clean longer than me who are still talking about the steps, praying, meditating, and abiding by our traditions. I'm blown away by that. And I go to a certain meeting on the West Coast where a lot of people have a lot of clean time. And they are just so calm, cool, and no recognition for it. Looking for nothing for it. The way they practice the principles is just such an example. And that's what we were taught, to lead by example. But this convention, quite some time ago, I'm going to say it was in 2009, this dude called me up. We were coming to the convention, my wife and I. And he says, "Hey, I need you to speak on traditions 6 and 7. I said, "Well, what time?" And I think it was like 10 o'clock or 10:30 after the main meeting Friday night. I go, "Yo, I have something. I have a commitment, a non-NA commitment." I said, "I have something to do. I'm not going to get down there till 10:30, 11. He goes, "Damn, you're the 5th person I asked." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Who are these people you asked? I couldn't share on the tradition." You'd be surprised. Some of them had 20 years clean. Mm-hmm. I said, "I'll be there." And I rearranged my schedule to come in. I share that not to criticize people that don't want to share in the traditions or feel they can't. I share that to say, we know more about the traditions than we take credit for.
That's right.
Right? Think of a personal experience where you had, especially say with money, the 7th tradition in your group where you decide where it goes. Or you ever have someone steal the money in your group?
Yep.
Yeah. And how did you deal with that situation? I bet you sat down and said the Serenity Prayer and thought of some guidance from a higher power at the group level on how not to kick that person's nuts.
That's right.
How do you lovingly deal with that? Mm-hmm. We had that happen in my group. You know what we relied on? Experience of members with the traditions. And I can't remember the bulletin now, but theft of NA funds. It's on the NA World Services website. That helped guide us. That, when we entrust a trusted servant with money and we don't keep them in check and ask questions and ask at every business meeting for accountability, we are as much at fault for that money being stolen as the person that stole it. Right. We have to look at our part and our and these are what the traditions teach us on a deeper level, so that we stay as Narcotics Anonymous. And I say that the sixth tradition keeps us as us. I love in the sixth tradition chapter in the basic text where it says, and I don't want to get into a debate or this disagreement over this. It says what it says, and I have my feelings on it as an old-timer. Speakers and literature and announcements from other fellowships are an implied endorsement. It was to separate us. Okay, so I'm not criticizing anyone that goes both places and doing it. Forget that. That's not where I'm going with this.
Right.
I'm going with this to stay on the topic that Narcotics Anonymous is a standalone fellowship on our own. And that is why old-timers are so strict and even rigid when it comes to the traditions, to keep us standalone as a fellowship. And that we are, I got clean when people said don't go to NA. They have no clean time. They have no recovery. They have no spirituality. Guess what? The people before me and around me stayed, and here we are, solid, strong, a lot of meetings, growing still, addicts. Think about this one for a minute. When Jimmy K and the people around him said, you know what? Maybe those 12 steps could work for addicts if we adapted them. So I'm going to say it this way. I went to public school. It might not be the right way to say it. If we said we adopted them, they'd be exactly the same as we adapted them. We changed them to fit our need.
That's right.
Now think about this. There were other 12-step movements that try to use we're powerless over drugs, we're powerless over... They changed it from we're powerless over to the disease of addiction. And here we are 7 decades plus later, and it applies to any addict with any substance in the disease of addiction. That was genius. That was God working in the fellowship. That was unity. That was primary purpose. That was the traditions working before we knew we had traditions. Before they knew what they were and how to use them. I told you I'm an NA history guy. I'll share something real quick. The other fellowship was born in 1935. Guess when they got the 12 traditions? 1949.
Wow.
They went like some 14, 15 years without the tradition. And out of need, they created. And so we adapted the 12 traditions, the 12 steps, and the 12 traditions. Right? And we had them available to us right away. But in the 50s, meetings were starting and closing. There was no service structure. If you were in California in the 50s, man, and you were an addict, you went to jail or a psych ward or died. There was no detox, no treatment centers, nothing like that. So through the slow growth in the 50s, and I like sharing this piece, and it's all tied into the traditions. The 60s come. Guess what I'll say it was one of the first service committees. It wasn't H&I, it was phone line. Right. They started a phone line like in the early 60s to find, addicts would maybe, in a phone book find the number. There wasn't really no H&I till like the 60s. Groups would maybe go into a jail. This is all in California. Because there was only like 10 groups like in 67. It wasn't until 68 there was a treatment center that started to believe the 12 steps could work. And people started coming out of treatment to Narcotics Anonymous. And we still didn't have a real service structure. There was a bunch of groups in California for like a decade, and then there was like 10 or 12. They decided to make 2 areas. And they fought like hell over it. They thought, oh, you're breaking up. And they formed the first region, 2 areas. We're still here because they started to filter in, how do we make this work? Well, we got these traditions to use. How do you organize subcommittees? How do you fund them? How do you stay anonymous? How do you not affiliate? How do you not endorse? How do you not get caught up in public issues, right? And that's what they were practicing all along. Our service structure didn't come together really to the 70s. And I love telling this story. I'm happy to meet this gentleman. We've become friendly because of virtual. He got clean in 68. And in 1970, he told Jimmy K, let's have a world convention. And in 1971, they had the first world convention. They only had 200 people there. They only had 200 people there. And look at where we're at today. You know, the convention last year, 24 rather, was in D.C. with 18,000, something like that. They wanted to have a World Service Conference because they found out in that World Convention in 71 that there were meetings in Canada, there was meetings in Britain, and there were meetings in Australia. They weren't all over Central and South America yet, they weren't all over Europe yet, and they weren't out in Asia yet. If you look at the first World Service Conference of 1976, I'm pretty sure I got the date of the year right. The first World Service Conference, I believe, was 76. And they only had like a dozen regions there. When we have our World Conference this year, there's 120-something regions, 120, 122 regions. This is how much we've grown. But the service structure itself, there was a guy named Greg Pierce, Greg P. He wrote the 12 traditions for the basic text. If you don't know him or heard tapes of him, he really made a contribution that helped flourish and bring to us easily understood what the traditions are, right? And he wrote a book called the NA Tree. You know how a tree, if it grows, at least this is what I was told, I don't know when, 50 years ago. A tree grows and the branches are put down and the roots are, as big as the branches and all. He called it the NA Tree. He said, this is going to be a worldwide fellowship. This was around 75, 76, 77. And he said, we're going to have regions. And it's going to be all over the world. And that's how we got the Guide to Local Service. Wow. It was from this NA Tree. And that is how we expanded into a service structure today where you have groups and area and region. We even have zonal forums. And you have the World Service Conference. Why did all this happen? Because NA members took the time to go ask someone. I'm from New York. They ask you up there. What's this tradition mean? Explain this to me. Show me this. And then others read. Then they went to area and region. And they went to World Service and got other perspectives. Yeah, I heard a guy from California talk about this. I heard a guy from Florida say this. And they brought it back to us, and we learned and put it to use. Mm-hmm. They talk about the traditions. How do we learn about them? We talk to many members and visit various groups.
That's right.
So, for the new people, you can learn this too. You don't have to sound good doing this. You just got to try to live and say, you know what? I went into H&I, and the dude started talking about, his probation and coming up, getting... I have no opinion on that, man, but I hope you make a meeting. Mm-hmm. What am I practicing? We don't get involved in outside issues. Right. If I go to an H&I treatment facility and the dude gets up, I'm on Suboxone. What does NA think of that? Mm-hmm. We have no opinion on outside issues, man. Wow. We just want you to come and get clean. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a lot of big debate now on MAT, DRT, and all that. Right. I learned the ABCs, but now we'll get to X, Y, and Z, I hope, in my time. Mm. We welcome people because, they're suffering, and we're here to help. And Jimmy K also said that we've been given a gift that, only people like us can help people like us. I didn't learn this. This ain't me. This is my years of talking to other addicts and working sponsorship and trying to live the principles of the steps and trying to apply and live the principles of the traditions, right? The steps are for personal recovery, and you need personal recovery to do service. You need personal recovery to practice these principles. So, I'm grateful for the lessons I learned. How much time we doing here?
Doing good, man. Keep on going.
No?
I got 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes?
Yeah. They can shut it down 3 more minutes.
But, I say this as an experienced member. I feel a responsibility and obligation. I can't believe so many people stayed for a traditions meeting. Mm-hmm. It breaks my heart. It saddens me when I hear people say, I don't want to do nothing with the traditions, or the traditions, they'll go to love and lust and, recovery and fuck everything else. And that's okay. But where would we be if some of us didn't take the time to do this and teach the newcomer that this is important? Where would Narcotics Anonymous be if we didn't stick to commitments? Where would we be if we didn't follow traditions? You know, last year, a friend of mine calls me up. He's clean a while. And he says, hey man, I got a call from a convention. And they want me to speak on he said the sixth, I thought he said the sixth concept. I said, oh, you're going to do it? He goes, I don't know, I don't have much experience with the concepts. I said, well, let me ask you something. Did he ask you to speak? You know, I'm thinking how they do the convention programming? This is step 6 and tradition 6, or steps 1, 2, and 3. Did he, I go, you know, tell me something. Did he ask you to speak on the sixth concept? Or concepts 1 to 6. He says there's only 6 concepts, right? We laugh, and it ain't funny.
Yeah.
I said, wow. Where is this gap that we're not teaching people?
Right.
Well, the traditions ain't a lot of fun, right? It ain't like, wow, man, that tradition. Damn, I'm going out tonight and get a steak. Some people find them boring. They're important. They're a priority. They're as important as the steps, especially you want to do so. And I used to tell people, I've been telling people this for years, that's fine, you don't want to be, you know, you're not into the traditions. But what you going to do when a sponsee comes to you and says, I was that area and this happened, and it affects policy, and they brought it in the tradition, and I didn't know what they was talking about.
Right.
How are you going to help them?
Yeah.
So I think we all have a responsibility, and you ain't got to be profound, and you ain't got to be no speech perfect person on the traditions. Just use some simple examples, right? We're responsible for the money. We make commitments. We don't endorse. I don't like social media a whole lot, but I've accepted the fact that social media is a part of life today. So some people are very loose with social media, with anonymity and stuff. You know, I go to different conventions outside the United States. I won't say the convention. I was at a convention a year and a half ago, and this dude everyone's filming with their camera. This dude's sitting right in front of there. And I was annoyed, and then I just said, you know what? Let me keep focus on the message. I'm not here to teach the dude, and I'm sure I'm not going to criticize him in front of everyone. But, you know, I think we've gotten a little loose on that a little bit sometimes. I remember when I got clean, damn, you had the Instamatic cameras. And they used to say, no picture taking, you know, and they didn't do it. Now you go to a convention, someone stands up at the Saturday night meeting doing the whole thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so we've changed, we've evolved, and, you know, we're generations now, and people do things different. You got to accept that people are going to, but, you know, there's a way to teach people, hey, man, this is how we do it, and this is why we do it, and this is why we don't do it. So I'm grateful to share on the traditions. The 6th tradition, I'm glad we don't lend our name out to no one. I'm glad we don't get involved with other enterprises, because we would be a hot mess. We got enough issues within our own fellowship to keep this going.
That's right.
If anyone's been involved with the car, you got the discussion topics and the surveys, you got major issues facing us, you know, to keep us alive and free so addicts can come and get clean. We have every member, whether you know it or not, has a responsibility that if you're in a home group and you participate in that home group, to set an example in that meeting, you know, to show up. And then when someone's new and say, yo, this is how we do it. And if they do something wrong, I remember they used to beat us over the head. You violated tradition. You know, like you're a cardinal sin, and they're going to come and cuff you and take you away. It don't have to be that way. Say, hey man, this is what I learned. This is what I learned not to do. This is how I learned it. So imagine if we did endorse or lend our name, we would have melted away a long time ago. Imagine if we didn't have anonymity, a lot of us would not have stayed. Imagine if we weren't self-supporting, we'd be owned by someone else. You know, imagine if we didn't follow the autonomy and the freedom of membership. I don't know if I should say this or not. I'll try to say it nice. We'd be sitting somewhere else, sober, wishing we were clean. And I don't mean that to knock. I'm grateful that there's a fellowship I can come to, that I identify with, that I feel is home, and that I'm welcomed in. Because I went to places where they said, don't talk about drugs.
That's right.
In my time. And old-timers experience worse than me with going to, and that's why we have Narcotics Anonymous. So I'm grateful to the traditions. I'm grateful to be able to share on the tradition. I hope it inspires someone to say, yo, you said something so simple that it clicks. Or when I'm in my home group business meeting next week, or if I go to area, or I got a call on a situation that happened, I can point that person in the right direction with the right spiritual principle to resolve that, because we're a program of solutions. We're a program of getting solutions. And that first step identified the problem and gave me the solution. And the traditions help us as a whole with the solution. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing.